Hey, it's Marko here from Fair Realty. Today I'm talking about the rescission period, also known as the cooling off period here in British Columbia. If you watched my previous videos, I am not a fan of this legislation. In fact, I think it's actually quite stupid. At the same time, I really believe in evolving myself with changing legislation, changing real estate markets, technology to represent the best interests of my clients, whether they be buyers or sellers. I want to put my client in the best possible position so they can have the best possible outcome on their real estate transaction. Fortunately for me, I do a huge volume of business, so even though this rescission period has been around only for 5 months, I've seen a ton of scenarios across my desk, and I'm developing on a continual basis strategies to help my clients navigate this, whether they're a buyer or a seller. So let me give you a few of my tips. First of all, starting with buyers. The first point, I'm not sure whether it's a tip, but it's more of a suggestion for realtors, is the contracts pertaining to the rescission period are incredibly poorly put together. You have the purchase price, and then right after the purchase price, you have the rescission fee amount, which always has to be filled in, even if the offer has conditions of 4 business days, 7 business days, 10 business days. The problem with this is this might mislead the buyer to thinking they actually have 3 business days after they remove conditions to change their mind, because they're seeing that rescission fee amount below the purchase price, even if they're writing a conditional offer. This is incorrect. So when you're representing the buyer, make sure to let them know, hey buyer, listen, you're writing an offer with 10 days of subjects. If you remove subjects after 10 days, you do not have another 3 days to think about this and pay the rescission fee if you decide in those 3 days. Also remind them when they're removing conditions, let's say after 10 days, just so you're aware, you're removing conditions. This is now a firm binding contract. The rescission period that you saw in the contract and that fee, that does not apply to you. So that's an important tip, because a buyer could come back and say, hey, listen, we want to get out of a contract after they've removed conditions. You say, well, sorry, you've removed conditions. And they'll say, well, what about the rescission fee on the contract? You'll explain it. And they'll say, well, you didn't explain that to me when we wrote the offer. If you're writing an unconditional offer where the rescission period does apply, do not assume that your buyer is going to be granted access by the seller before the rescission period expires, or any time before completion, unless you explicitly write that into the contract. I'm seeing a lot of realtors write unconditional offers, and then after it's accepted, they ask for access prior to the rescission period expiring. The seller legally does not have to let you back into the house unless it's agreed upon in the contract. One strategy as a buyer's agent you might want to choose in a particular situation to explore is doing an unconditional offer with a clause, not a subject, with a clause that the seller will allow the buyer's inspector or access to the property to inspect the property prior to the rescission period expiring. So you're probably asking yourself, well, what's the difference between this and just writing a subject to inspection? Well, the difference is it might put your buyer in a stronger position in a multiple offer situation, because if it's an unconditional offer with access to the property for inspection before the rescission period expires, at least the buyer has some skin in the game. And what I mean by this is, if the buyer exercises the rescission period, they have to pay the rescission period fee. Versus the buyer who has a subject to inspection, if they collapse the offer based on the inspection, there is no fee to be paid. So the seller might look at this situation and say, you know what, I'm more comfortable with this because the buyer has monetary investment in this offer should they walk away, versus the other one has zero monetary investment and obligations should they walk on subject to inspection. So that's another strategy you can use with buyers. I could go on for another half hour, but I like to make my videos quick. So let's switch over to the selling side of things. When you're representing sellers, I have quite a few suggestions. I'll go over a few of them. Don't delay offers until Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Why? Because the rescission period is 3 business days. If you delay an offer till Thursday, it crosses the weekend. The buyer actually has 5 days to back out of the contract versus 3. If you delay offers till Monday or Tuesday, then the rescission period expires Thursday or Friday. It's actually 3 days, not 5 days. If you're receiving offers in a multiple offer situation and you have unconditional offers from buyer's agents and you're representing the seller and they have nothing in the contract about access to the property, be aware a lot of realtors are not providing appropriate counsel to their buyers, and they will request access to the property once the unconditional offer is signed prior to the 3 business days expiring for the rescission period. Now all of a sudden you're in a dilemma. Do you let that buyer back into the home or do you deny access? Doing one or the other, does that increase the chances of the buyer following through, or does the buyer use the rescission period to walk away? So here's my suggestion. When you're looking at multiple offers and some of them are unconditional, text or email the buyer's agent and say, listen, you have put nothing into this contract about access to the property. If we sign your contract, your unconditional contract, my seller is not going to allow access to the property. Is this going to be an issue with your client? Question mark, yes or no? Guaranteed, the vast majority of buyer's agents are going to reply because you've cornered them to help their negotiating position in that multiple offer situation. They're going to say, no, it's not going to be an issue. Well, guess what? Then the contract signed, you have a record that you told them, as per the contract, you're not going to allow access back to the house. And if push comes to shove, where access is not specified in the contract, but the buyer's agent reaches out with something along the lines, well, can my buyers come back on Monday to take some measurements because they're so excited so they can order their furniture or something along those lines. And let's say the rescission period expires Monday at midnight. Well, what you could do in this particular scenario is call their bluff. You can say, well, listen, my clients, the sellers, they're busy Monday with working from home, kids. There's nothing in the contract about access to the house. They cannot accommodate Monday, but my clients, the sellers, will act in good faith and you can come on Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday. And this way, you're calling their bluff. Do they really need to come take measurements, or do they want to see the house a second time before the rescission period expires so they can decide whether they want to move forward or not? There are many other strategies you can learn through experience to help navigate your clients, whether they be buyers or sellers, to put them in the best potential outcome. So while I don't agree with the legislation, it's important to evolve with the legislation in terms of representing the best interests of your clients. That's it for this week. Marko, Juras, Fair Realty.